In 1884, a group of European powers sat around a table in Berlin and divided an entire continent like pieces of cake. No African was invited. No African consented. But Africa was carved up anyway. Now, over a century later, another scramble has begun, but this time it's silent. There are no maps, no flags, no declarations of war. Just contracts, corporations, loans, and foreign interests buying the future piece by piece. This is the new scramble for Africa, and this time, it's not about colonizing land. It's about controlling power. To understand the new scramble, we have to remember the first one. In the winter of 1884, leaders from Britain, France, Germany, Belgium, Portugal, and others gathered in Berlin. Their goal? To divide Africa among themselves, for trade, for power, for profit. They never stepped foot on African soil. They didn't speak African languages, and not a single African voice was present. With rulers, they drew straight lines through kingdoms, tribes, cultures, destroying centuries of identity and replacing it with artificial borders we still live with today. The Congo was handed to one man, King Leopold of Belgium, as his personal property. Over 10 million Congolese died under his rule. They came for gold, ivory, rubber, and slaves, and they left behind division, conflict, and underdevelopment. That was the first scramble. It was brutal. It was shameless. But it never really ended. The old colonizers took land, people, and power with guns. The new ones used contracts, loans, military bases, and silence. Welcome to the new scramble, and meet the new players. China entered Africa with bulldozers, not battleships. No history of colonization. No lectures about democracy. Just offers to build what Africa desperately needed: roads, railways, airports, power grids. And Africa said yes. Between 2000 and 2023, China signed over 1,000 major infrastructure projects across Africa, from railways in Kenya to skyscrapers in Ethiopia. They built the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa as a gift. In Zambia, the Chinese built the Kenneth County International Airport and also controlled the Lusaka power grid. In Angola, oil was traded directly for infrastructure under what's called resource-backed loans. But many experts, and even African leaders, now worry about China's grip. As of 2023, at least 21 African countries owe China over $150 billion in total debt. When these debts can't be paid, what's the collateral? Some fear the answer may be ports, mines, or political loyalty. Critics call it debt trap diplomacy. Supporters call it smart business. Either way, China has reshaped the continent's physical landscape more than any other power this century. Unlike China, the U.S. didn't come with cement. It came with boots, soldiers, drones, bases, surveillance. The United States Africa Command, known as AFRICOM, was created in 2007 to coordinate all U.S. military operations on the continent. Today, The U.S. operates at least 29 known military sites across Africa, most of them unmarked or classified. In Niger, a massive U.S. drone base was built at a cost of $110 million, supposedly to combat terrorism. Yet locals say the base has little to do with their safety, and more to do with monitoring Sahel routes and nearby resources. In Somalia, Djibouti, Libya, Cameroon, the U.S. is quietly present. No parades, no flags, just quiet control. And now, private U.S. military contractors and intelligence firms are investing in Africa's digital infrastructure, from satellite surveillance to cybersecurity partnerships. Is it about protection or projection? France's empire officially ended in the 1960s, but ask many in West Africa, and they'll tell you it never really left. 14 African countries still use a French-backed currency called the CFA franc, a system created in 1945 that allows France to control monetary policy in parts of West and Central Africa. These nations must deposit up to 50% of their foreign reserves with the French treasury. In return, they get stability. But at what cost? Beyond money, France has maintained a powerful military presence. In Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, French troops were stationed for counter-terrorism operations. But people took to the streets, waving Russian flags and burning French ones, accusing France of using terrorism as an excuse to stay and extract. In 2023, France was expelled from Mali and Burkina Faso, and its influence continues to decline, but the legacy remains. Russia's return to Africa hasn't come with cash or concrete, but with strategy and security. Since 2014, Russia has rapidly increased its influence across Africa, especially in countries disillusioned with the West. In Mali and the Central African Republic, Russia sent military trainers and advisors, often linked to the Wagner Group, a private paramilitary group accused of mercenary activity and resource extraction. In return, Russia has secured mining deals, especially in gold and diamonds, often through backdoor agreements. It's not building malls, it's building alliances, especially where France is being pushed out. In 2019, Russia hosted its first ever Africa Summit in Sochi, inviting 43 African leaders. It promised partnerships, military support, and non-interference, a soft sell with hard consequences. The UK once ruled vast stretches of Africa, from Nigeria to South Africa. But today, its influence has faded. Still, Britain maintains strong ties with Commonwealth countries through education, aid, and diplomacy. The British Council, BBC, and UK-funded NGOs continue to shape minds and media, but the real currency is soft power. In places like Kenya, Ghana, and Uganda, Britain funds development projects while also benefiting from preferential trade agreements. And while it may not build railways like China or deploy troops like the US, the UK still plays a quiet hand, often through corporate footprint, media influence, and advisory roles in government policy. One of the most surprising new players is Turkey. Since 2002, Turkey has expanded its embassy network from 12 to over 40 African countries. President Erdogan has visited Africa more than any non-African leader in the last decade. Turkish companies now build roads, airports, and mosques. Turkish Airlines flies to more African capitals than most European carriers. Turkey positions itself as an alternative to the East-West divide, a partner from the global South. India's connection with Africa is centuries old, through trade, migration, and culture. Today, it's one of Africa's top 5 trading partners. Indian companies invest in telecoms, pharmaceuticals, and agriculture. Airtel Africa is one of the largest mobile networks on the continent. Unlike China, India doesn't invest in flashy infrastructure. It focuses on skills training, technology, and healthcare, especially in East Africa. The UAE, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia have quietly been buying up massive land in Sudan, Ethiopia, and Kenya. Why? Food security. These desert nations want to grow food in Africa and export it back home. So, one builds, one defends, one refuses to let go. It's Russia supplying guns for gold, Turkey flying in contracts, India wiring in tech, the Gulf states buying the soil itself. The new scramble is no longer a war between East and West. It's a competition from all directions, and Africa is still the prize. We've seen the players. Now, let's talk about the prize. Because this time, they are not taking slaves or drawing maps. They are taking something far more valuable and far more subtle. Africa holds over 30% of the world's mineral reserves. Gold in Ghana, cobalt in the Congo, oil in Nigeria and Angola, lithium in Zimbabwe. In fact, without Africa, your smartphone wouldn't work. Cobalt, a key mineral in batteries and electric vehicles, is mined mostly in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and much of that is controlled by Chinese companies. In South Africa and Guinea, foreign companies control vast portions of platinum and bauxite production. In Tanzania, mining rights are being sold in secret, sometimes for a fraction of their value. It's called extraction, and it's happening in plain sight. Across the continent, millions of hectares of farmland are being leased or sold to foreign governments and corporations. In Sudan, Ethiopia, Kenya, Mozambique, land is being handed over for up to 99 years. What's grown there? Often not for Africans. The crops are exported to feed people thousands of miles away. In 2008, a South Korean firm tried to lease half of Madagascar's arable land. The backlash was so fierce, it triggered a revolution. Since then, the deals have gone quiet, but they haven't stopped, and many locals are never informed until they're evicted. Africa is not just being mined physically, it's being mined digitally. In 2018, it was discovered that the African Union's headquarters, built by China, had its data servers sending information to Shanghai every night for 5 years.
Now, 46 years ago, there was the Watergate scandal in the U.S., which cost then-President Nixon his job. He was implicated in the attempt to plant listening devices in the Democratic Party's National Committee in the Watergate building in Washington, D.C. Now, the latest bugging scandal involved the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, that the Chinese built in the year 2012. The French newspaper Le Monde quoted anonymous sources at the African Union headquarters as claiming the following. that the Chinese had planted listening devices in desks and in the walls of the building. The devices picked up information of every kind from African officials. This information was then relayed to Shanghai late at night when the building was shut. This had been going on for the last 5 years. Now, Le Monde quoted the officials as saying the microphones were discovered during a routine sweep. The devices were removed and the servers also changed. The report made headlines the day before the African Union Summit opened on Monday, a point which the Chinese claim was significant.
The timing of the article was very interesting. It was published just one day before the summit. So I think that the story was intended for the African countries here and to attract the attention. But I think that they would not succeed.
Meta, Google, and China's Huawei are racing to control Africa's digital future, laying undersea internet cables, installing smart city systems, and hosting African data on foreign servers. The world is not just tracking Africa's minerals. It's tracking your clicks, your face, your location, and your voice. In the new Scramble, information is power, and power is money. They're also taking something deeper, control over African minds. Education systems across Africa still use colonial curriculums. Foreign NGOs write policy papers. Foreign universities get the best scholars. Even African history is often taught from European perspectives. Add to that media. BBC, CNN, France 24, RT. They tell the world Africa's story, while many African voices remain unheard. The scramble today is not just for gold or land. It's for perception, policy, and the power to shape Africa's future from outside. This is what they are taking: the ground beneath our feet, the minerals in our soil, the food from our farms, the data from our devices, and the truth from our tongues. This is colonization without the colony. But what happens when people start to resist? When leaders say no and citizens rise up? Across the continent, something is changing. The old silence is cracking. The people are rising. In Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, citizens poured into the streets, demanding an end to French military presence. They said, "Enough! No more soldiers. No more silence. No more invisible control." In 2023, France was officially expelled from Mali and Burkina Faso. In Niger, military leaders shut down French bases and cut military ties. For the first time in decades, former colonies are saying no. Some African leaders are refusing to play the old game. In 2020, Ghana's President Nana Akufo-Addo said, "We can no longer continue to make policy for ourselves based on whatever support the Western world gives us." In Kenya, debates around Chinese debt and sovereignty have gone public, with citizens and parliamentarians pushing back on opaque deals. And across the Sahel, calls for a return to Pan-Africanism are getting louder. With over 60% of Africa's population under 25, the youth are not just Africa's future, they are its present. Young people are learning the truth online. They are rejecting colonial curriculums. They are creating content, tech, movements, and rewriting their story. From TikTok and Twitter to podcasts and YouTube channels like this one, the narrative is shifting from what the world says Africa is to what Africans say Africa is becoming. Pan-African thinkers like Thomas Sankara and Kwame Nkrumah once dreamed of a united Africa, free from exploitation. Today, that spirit is being reborn through regional unity projects like AfCFTA, the African Continental Free Trade Area, through ECOWAS, SADC, and new currency talks. Movements like #Africa to the World, #Decolonize Education, and #Own Your Data are growing digitally and on the streets. Africa may still be fighting the same war, but this time, more people know it happening. And as long as people know, as long as people resist, this scramble won't end the same way. So what does the future hold? Can Africa break free from the grip of its past and control its future? Let's finish with what's truly at stake. Africa is the youngest continent on Earth. By 2050, it will hold over 2.5 billion people, more than a quarter of the world's population. It's home to the largest reserves of gold, platinum, cobalt, and rare earth minerals. It has the largest amount of untapped arable land. It holds 60% of the world's solar energy potential. Who controls Africa's future may control the world's future. Despite all this wealth, Africa produces just 3% of global GDP. Over 400 million Africans live on less than $2 a day, and many countries still rely on loans from the very powers extracting their resources. So the question is not just what's being taken, it's what's being lost. We are losing control over our land, our minerals, our data, and even our destiny. We are losing forests in the Congo Basin, the lungs of the world, to illegal logging. We are losing soil to long leases. We are losing talent to brain drain. And we are losing time, while others plan centuries ahead. But there is still one thing we haven't lost: the power to decide what happens next. This is not the 1880s. Africa is not a helpless continent. It is a rising force with choices to make. The real question isn't who is scrambling for Africa. It's, will Africa scramble for itself before it's too late? Africa has been here before. We've seen flags change. We've seen systems fall. But the story remains the same. Outsiders reaching in and Africans looking on. The methods are new. The names are different. But the question is still the same. Who controls Africa? And who should? This is the new scramble, and it won't be decided by wars or conferences. It will be decided by who is paying attention, who is asking the hard questions, who is saying no to silent exploitation and yes to African ownership. If Africa doesn't claim its future, someone else will. So now it's up to us, not just leaders and governments, but students, creators, thinkers, and builders. We are the resistance. We are the awakening. We are the generation that must choose to own the future, or watch it be sold again. If this opened your eyes, subscribe to AfriEye. Share this. Challenge what you've been told. And most importantly, stay watching. Because a scramble is happening. And if we don't tell the story, someone else will.